the administration were to say, okay, the JCPO is completely dead, there's no going back to it in the foreseeable future, they need to have an Iran policy. And what would that Iran policy be?
You have to, okay. What would that Iran policy be? Well, okay, ask a question. How do you stop a rogue nation from acquiring nuclear weapons? You have to ask yourself that. Well, let's see. I mean, there have been some examples, so we can maybe deduce a rule. Well, you had one that's called Saddam Hussein's Iraq. It was stopped by military force, ours. You had a second one that is called Syria, that tried to develop nuclear weapons, and it was stopped by military action, ours. There was a third country, Muammar Gaddafi's Libya. It wanted to pursue nuclear weapons, and it gave it up by the threat of a military action, yours. There's a fourth country, North Korea, that sought to develop nuclear weapons, and it wasn't China. By the way, a signatory to the NPTs and all these agreements. It doesn't mean anything. And they were stopped. They weren't stopped because there was no threat of use of nuclear weapons, of military action. And so they developed this capacity. Now we have Iran. Iran seeks to develop it. It was actually stopped for a year in their program in 2003 when they thought, right after the Gulf War, when they thought that America would take action against them. So they stopped, then converted into a secret program disguised by various civilian so-called research organizations, but they continued. And they've been stopped, or rather slowed down, by various actions that we took and some sanctions that were applied, which were important, which we had to encourage, shall we say, the U.S. and the sanctions came about because the Americans were saying this crazy guy in Jerusalem is going to bomb them unless we do something. So that's how Iran came to the table. But then they left the cash on the table and let Iran take did a lousy agreement. So the only thing that has credibly stopped rogue nations from developing nuclear weapons is a credible military threat or a credible military action. You can couple that with crippling economic sanctions, but that's not a sufficient condition. A necessary condition, and often a sufficient condition, is credible military action. The longer you wait, the harder that becomes. We've waited very long. In any case, I can tell you that I will do everything in my power to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. That is not merely an Israeli interest, it's an American interest, it's in the interest of the entire world. If we beat them to the punch, I think we can expand the circle of peace, and if we expand the circle of peace to Saudi Arabia, then I think we effectively end the Arab-Israeli conflict, which means we work our way, not inside out, solve the Palestinian problem. I believe that pursuing a peace that is based on common interest of using Israeli power, military, intelligence, technological, and economic, to buttress local, that is, peace agreements and normalization agreements with our neighbors, can help achieve two things. One, it can expand the circle of peace. Second, it can serve as a bulwark against Iran. And I think we can have a quantum leap if the Saudi leadership decides that it wants to be formally part of this. Informally, they're part of this.